Dennis Liegghio. Good to see you, brother.
Good to see you too, Rich.
It's been a minute for us, although we've known each other for quite a few years.
Yeah, we have.
Right on. So let me give a quick introduction here for you, for the audience and the listeners. You are a graphic designer, singer, songwriter, musician. You started your first graphic design business in 1998, but you've been dedicated to mental health and are a founder of several impactful initiatives. You're the founder of KnowResolve, which was established in 2007 as a 501(c)(3) nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting mental health and preventing youth suicides through outreach, advocacy, and education. In your personal journey, after losing your father to suicide at the age of 14, you struggled with depression and suicidal thoughts yourself. But writing a song for your father became a turning point toward your healing and inspired the creation of KnowResolve. You are a public speaker where you share your story to approximately 10,000 teens and young adults each year, aiming to connect with those suffering in silence and convey that seeking help leads to hope. You're also the founder of the Detour Project, which aims to foster emotional well-being, self-expression, creativity, and community building through art. And this program supports participants in exploring processing their emotions in a safe, non-judgmental environment while using artistic expression as a tool for personal and collective growth. And your initiatives with these both organizations as well as public speaking has reached over 185,000 students, providing resources and support to those struggling with mental health issues, which is a huge place of need, as well as the fact that you've already been doing such tremendous work by reaching that many people in the time that you've been doing this. As another fellow creative and as someone who has dealt with that depression and suicidal thought, and then also too from my side of it, going in that direction, stepping off the ledge kind of a thing. I've always empathized with your story to an extent, but I'd like to give the viewers and the listeners a bit of a more of a glimpse into your story. So I want to start it off with my only scripted question. Everything
Okay.
else will just be flying by the seat of our pants. But the scripted question is, where were you born and what was life like as a kid for Dennis?
Cottage Hospital in Detroit. And I don't know, life seemed through childhood typical. A lot of the family lived close, grew up with my cousins, just playing outside and making friends and doing kid stuff.
Right.
Everything seemed pretty run of the mill.
Okay. How was school for you in like elementary? Were you one of the shy kids or were you one of the kids who were easily to gravitate to, or were you the class clown?
I don't know if class clown is an accurate description, but I was the same way in grade school as I am now, which is just weird. Yeah, even back then I really didn't feel like I fit in with a crowd. I remember my lunchbox, and I always liked the construction worker lunch boxes with
Rounded
the
tops.
thermos that went in the top of it,
Yeah, yeah.
and I would make mine talk and burp, and that was very funny to me. Still seems very funny. I remember fourth grade wanting to be a businessman like my dad, so I wore a suit and carried a briefcase to school. So even back then, just these a little bit strange, atypical behaviors. I don't know, for mostly just for my own amusement.
What type of work did your dad do as a businessman?
He was an accountant.
An accountant. Okay. Numbers guy. Analytical mind.
To a degree. I think I didn't get to know him as an adult, but the things that I've heard from family is that he was also very much into sports, and I do remember him playing hockey when I was little. He was into running. He was very good with woodworking and carpentry, so he was creative in that way.
Okay. Okay.
And yeah, I think we see our parents as one-dimensional growing up. The older I've gotten, the more well-rounded his picture has become for me.
Right on. And how about your mom? What was she stay-at-home mom or did she work as well?
She was a stay-at-home mom until, I don't know, until I think we were maybe after the divorce.
Okay. And you had a brother too, correct?
Yep. Yep.
How much
Younger brother.
how much difference in age are you guys?
We are 2.5 years apart and 2.5 worlds apart.
Mm,
Very different people. We're very close still, but very different in just about every way. Jim excelled in academics, and I was lucky to pass each grade each year.
right on. So, right around the time that you're going into junior high, this event takes place with your father. Did you have any inclinations that there might be something taking place with him where you saw maybe a scenario where he was becoming reclusive or not really engaged with you and your brother or your mother at all?
No, I didn't see any of that at all. I think I was 7 or 8 when they got divorced.
Okay. That was going
And
to be my
then
next question.
there were, I just remember years of custody battles and the headaches and stomach aches that came along with not knowing from week to week what the situation was because it changed fairly often. After the divorce, my dad got remarried, and his his wife, my stepmom, was great. Her sons were great. And I always remembered whether it was a week or a weekend or an evening or whatever the case may be, like always had fun with my dad. It was always a good time. So no, I didn't see any reclusiveness or any of the typical warning signs. Our last interaction was a big fight, and looking back on that, I suppose maybe it could have been viewed as a warning sign that he was flying off the handle the way he was about my grades. But I do remember him screaming at me like he never had before
Okay.
in that argument. And so looking back on that now, knowing what I know, that was probably some kind of indication of his headspace. But I also know, knowing what I know now as a middle-aged man and father, like how overwhelming life is and how easy it is to lose your footing. It's impossible to be calm in every moment. But yeah, other than that, no,
Okay.
really never.
Were did you find yourself being creative as as a young kid in elementary school and during that time when that was taking place with your mom and dad?
Oh yeah, I was always interested in the arts in some way, shape, or form. My whole coping thing in middle school was drawing comic books and getting in trouble for drawing those comic books.
Now, was that getting in trouble drawing the comic books because you weren't doing your other work, or was it because of the content potentially?
Both, both.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
right on. How was it when you're with your mom how much of a contrast was it dealing with that back and forth between the two of them in terms of the environment at one house versus the other? And were was it you and your brother going together at the same time back and forth, or were there times when it was a split up scenario?
There were times when it was split up.
Okay.
I have trouble remembering details from that period of time, and probably because it was very difficult.
Yeah.
I don't know. There was definitely a contrast. Like my dad was the fun parent, and I think my mom tried to be, but she's got her own issues that she deals with mental health wise. And I think as we became older and became people with personalities, we got harder and harder to deal with for her.
Okay.
That relationship was strained for many years, and now it is just no contact and has been that way for some time.
Oh man, I hate to hear that for you, but I get it. I get it. With now at this point in life, and you just mentioned that she has some mental health issues herself, do you think potentially that there was some trickle down effect into you and your brother as well from like a genetic standpoint?
Definitely.
Okay,
From both sides.
got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that because I know that's the case within our family as well. And it's been on both sides of the family, even going back a couple generations. It's been there. As you and I both know, in terms of studies that have taken place over the years in the mental health space, that's been really looked at as a marker within individuals, whether or not that's been passed down and potentially a genetic marker that's input into a person's life that's dealing with those types of things.
Yeah. And just from my own lived experience and layperson's understanding of all of this stuff, trauma just affects your brain in very physical and literal ways. All that executive functioning prefrontal cortex stuff, like if that isn't fully formed or developed or is subjected to some manner of abuse, like there's only so much you can do.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Slipping into middle school at roughly 13, how was that shift from elementary into middle school for you? Was there an extreme transition? I'm guessing you probably had to switch schools at that point as well.
I was in South Lake schools for most of elementary. We went to Catholic school until early elementary, then we switched to South Lake schools. So I went from grade school to middle school in that same district. So it wasn't huge. And all the schools are like in the neighborhood, the St. Clair Shores. Just about everything was walkable. And all of the kids from my elementary school went to that middle school. So there wasn't a huge
Social
uh,
shift.
as far as the people, but middle school's awful for all of us. I think I've never heard anybody say, yeah, middle school was awesome. Your body's going through changes, your brain's going through changes. It's smelly.
Yeah.
You know, it's a brutal time.
Did that make you feel even more as an oddball, so to speak? You described it as you felt out of place, nerdy.
Yeah, again, and I worshipped Weird Al Yankovic as a kid, and some part of me still does. Like, guy's awesome.
Yeah.
But yes, so maybe middle school is where you start seeing the shift into cliques or scenes, or you identify with a certain group of kids, or you start noticing who's wearing what. I don't know, but I was getting the shit kicked out of me on a nearly daily basis by this one kid. And so I found support socially through the quote unquote burnouts.
Okay.
because those kids were standing up for me. And so I gravitated towards them because they were also like not really fitting in.
Yeah, not socially acceptable, so to speak. So with that, that's very interesting because you've got this antagonist in your storyline who's just literally hounding the shit out of you every day in an environment where you're trying to figure out where you're at and find some kind of comfort zone in terms of relatability with others. And he's just incessantly after you. And at a certain point, did that burnout crowd, as you described them, did they help put a stop to that or at least pause the frequency of that experience?
Yes, they put that was the end of it. You
Yeah.
go through all, and this is a story as old as time, right? Like
Yeah.
kids get picked on, and there's always bullies and this and that. But so all the other routes were not working. Like you go home, you tell your mom what's happening. Your mom comes to the principal or the teachers. The principal has a talk with that kid, and then it gets worse because you're a narc. And
Yeah.
so finally, it just took, I'll never forget the day home ec class. He was at it again, and what he loved to do was just punch me in the arm or the chest until like bruises started. And so it was happening in home ec class, and my buddy Rob at the time walked up to him, grabbed him by the collar, punched him in the face, and threw him over a table. And that was the end of that. So
Nice. Okay.
I'll say the same thing today that I said back then. That's really the only way to stop them.
Standing up for yourself is a lot of times becomes a pivotal moment in a life, or having somebody step in and stand up for you as well is
That's interesting though, because that pivotal moment, somebody else was standing up for me. So it took me a long time to figure out how to stand up for myself
mm,
because I didn't have to in that moment. I didn't make that connection until just now, but yeah.
okay. Interesting. And so I'm assuming at that point as well, you and Rob become fast friends to an extent because of that act of kindness.
Yeah, yeah. There was there's a close bond there.
Yeah. And was Rob in that circle of the burnouts, so to speak, was Rob a leader in that pack, or was he just one of the crew and he had the heart to be able to say that, hey, this isn't cool, what's happening to you?
Yeah, I think he just had the heart. I don't really remember any followers or leaders in that thing. It was more of a just communal, hey,
Yeah,
we don't seem to fit in anywhere else, so let's stick together kind of thing.
right. Now, one of the stereotypical characteristics of the quote unquote burnout crowd is that they're smoking, drinking, doing drugs, any of that type of stuff. Did that come into play at that point in time for you, or did you experience any of that?
I don't remember the drug thing so much, but yeah, I was in eighth grade when I had my first drink and when I had my first cigarette.
Okay. You're 14 and this tragic event takes place in your life, correct?
I think that happened in ninth grade. Yeah,
Ninth
I
grade.
was in
Okay.
ninth grade when it happened. Yep.
Okay.
So high school for that.
Gotcha. All right. Again, this is another turning point in an individual's life where there's a shift from a social crowd, so to speak, in junior high into another level of that social crowd as a high schooler. And being a freshman is always the another year of feeling disconnected or not fitting in or feeling strange because you've always got the upperclassmen now looking down on you because you're a freshman. You're just coming into the picture of their world that they've been in for 3, 4 years. How much of that was taking place still on, or was it still where you had the connection with the burnout, so it wasn't too much of a hard transition into ninth grade?
I don't really remember any in ninth grade. I do remember the summer before ninth grade starting, like my biggest fear was getting shoved into a locker.
Okay.
That never happened. Yeah,
So
terrified of it.
really, so even the fact that you had somebody that stuck up for you and was a friend looking out for you here and there, you still had this fear, this potential element of because I've been picked on, it's going to continue and it's going to happen even worse so by potentially getting shoved in a locker.
Yeah, and whatever today's version of getting shoved in a locker is, or whatever that version was in the 70s, I think just about every kid prior to actually going into ninth grade probably has some degree of that. But yeah, I would literally have nightmares about it.
And
That's always the way my brain's worked anyway, always in fear of the worst case scenario.
yeah, I can relate to that as well.
Still
That's
to this day.
that's a huge that's a huge
The lockers just changed.
yeah, that's a huge element of uh, anxiety in people is the thought of things taking place that have not happened yet.
And likely won't.
Correct. Correct. Was there, that's pretty specific when you're saying getting stuffed in a locker. Did you see that in a movie, or was there something else other, maybe it was just seeing somebody, another kid get done that way? Was it a movie, another kid, or was there potentially another experience that kind of resembled that scenario, like a closet, being stuck in a closet or anything like that?
I don't remember
Okay,
where that came from. No idea. But I do know that I have always been and still am like
fearful of those things.
claustrophobic,
Okay,
fearful of being, yeah, that's the
confined.
ultimate fear, getting buried alive.
And so, yeah, being confined
Yeah.
to things.
Yeah.
Do you find that when you're in a room as well at certain times? Yeah. The reason I ask that is because whenever I go to the doctor's office, you get put into the room to wait for the doctor to come in, as he's doing his rounds. And I always have to reach over and crack the door because those rooms make me feel claustrophobic. So I've got to open the door so I know that there's an out and I can literally see it, that the door's not locked. I can see the hallway. I can still get out if necessary. And I have no idea why that's the case, unless maybe it's related to when I was in the hospital after my suicide attempt and not being able to get out. That may have been a big part of that. But as you're in ninth grade, at what point of the year did your dad take his own life?
Right around now, it was day, I always get it mixed up, day before or day after his 42nd birthday.
Okay.
So February 23rd is either the birthday or the anniversary, and then February 24th, either the birthday or the anniversary. Can
Okay.
never remember which one comes first, but yeah. So halfway through the year.
Yeah. Yeah. And how did you find out that this had taken place?
So my mom got a phone call from our stepmom, and this is all based on what I was told. He had taken off, disappeared, very agitated, and she didn't know what was going on, where he was, what he was planning to do. So my mom freaked out because she thought he was coming after us. She took us to our grandma's house, and then I think, who is now my adoptive father's house. I don't remember how many nights he was missing, but it was a handful. And then one morning we got up and there was breakfast, and we were told that the police had called overnight early in the morning and that they had found him and that he was gone. I don't remember at that point, as far as the timeline goes, when we found out that it was self-inflicted, but I do remember my mother telling us at Taco Bell for some reason.
Okay.
I don't know why that stands out.
Yeah, that is, I guess it's those scenarios of getting the information that is as tragic as that is in a specific location that kind of imprints in the mind and in the memory. And at that point in time,
You
you'd
would think that I would hate Taco Bell now, but the opposite is true. I
still
love
love it.
Taco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The you'd mentioned one of the last times that you saw him, you had an argument with him, and now you're getting word that this has taken place. What kind of emotion is surging through you at that point in time, and what is your mind like?
Oh, every emotion, just the gamut. Of course, this is my fault. I did this. So the guilt and then anger and then just numbness, and it's an onslaught of emotions. What I do remember very clearly is my entire worldview changing like that day
Okay.
and feeling like childhood was over and I'm a grown up now and this world is not safe
Yeah, that's
and nothing matters.
okay. Okay. So even that drastic of a shift.
Overnight.
Yeah, right on. Within that new reality, you just described all the shifts that took place, and you're in high school. So I'm assuming you're, are you off out of school for a few days, or did you go right back into school, or how did that scenario play out for you? Do you remember?
I don't. I'm
Okay.
sure we were off for a bit. I don't know how long that was. I don't even know that I remember finishing freshman year.
Okay.
But I do know that what I do remember is moving, right? And starting over somewhere new.
Okay.
Mom got married, we moved, we asked our stepdad to adopt us, so we changed everything. We left everything behind, and that is what I wanted to do. I just wanted to pretend like none of
Didn't
this
matter.
happened, none of it mattered, and just move forward.
Did you turn to your creative side to self-soothe at that point even more?
Yes. And I remember the only one of the only classes that I cared about in the new place was creative writing. And fortunately had a teacher who was very supportive and non-judgmental. I have no idea how much of my story she knew because I didn't really tell anything, but I know that the things that I wrote about were pretty dark
Okay.
and vulgar. And I always got good grades, and she always encouraged me to keep writing. And so, yeah. And then the other stuff started taking graphic design and art foundations and photography and all the art and art related classes that I could, which is probably the only reason that I was able to pass grade to grade because everything else aside from English I couldn't do.
Yeah.
It was around that time that I met Paul, who you know,
Yeah.
and he had a guitar, so I wanted a guitar, and I bought a cheap used one. And we would hang out every day after school playing guitars and making just ridiculous music. So yes, that was like still the outlet and the release and for it all to go.
What's interesting too is this teacher that is in this class that's reading your stuff, the things that you're expressing. And even though it is as dark as it is or as vulgar it is, she's still encouraging you to keep doing that. So
She's an artist.
yeah, she had the capacity to sense some emotional elements within you that she knew needed to be nurtured and encouraged so that you could continue to potentially release through that form.
Yeah. Yeah. And who knows how much of an age gap in high school? Everybody looks like they're 80 years old. She was not 80 years old. I'm sure she was, I don't know, maybe 40. But
Yeah,
that's one of the things that I've always loved about quote unquote creative types, right? The age thing doesn't play much of a role. And I think that we all in this kind of circle recognize how much of life is just bullshit, meaningless bullshit.
yeah,
And that act of creating without the judgment or this is good or this is bad or what, because there's an audience for anything and not everything even needs an audience. It's just about expressing yourself. This is something that matters in a life and world where a lot doesn't.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
I got that. I got that from her. So yeah, it was a saving grace along with every other creative thing and person who allowed you to be creative without being judgmental about what you're making.
Yeah,
It's been a lifesaver all my life.
yeah, and it's huge too that as well as interesting that those people come into your life at particular points in time where you may be breaking down internally yourself because of a traumatic experience or a tragic event, different things like that. But they're like the angels that swoop in and keep you moving forward or keep you standing a little bit rather than complete collapse within those experiences. You're hanging out with Paul, you guys are creating some music, doing those types of things. And are you, I'm guessing this is going into junior year, senior year that this is taking place. Are you starting to think maybe you want to go to college to further this creative career, or are you thinking, I don't know, maybe I'm going to start a band because we're playing these music, doing this music thing, or what is your thought process as high school is starting to come to a close for you?
I can't, 11th grade, somewhere around there. I had also gotten a job at a graphic design place,
Okay.
just doing ads for local circulars and stuff. To me, no, I never thought about college or a career path or really the future. That's not ever been
Yeah.
my thing at all. It's always been about like all you've got is right now, today,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's it. So I wanted to be I wanted to be working and self-sufficient so I could get out of the house
Okay.
like the second I graduated.
Got you. Got you. Yeah, because you mentioned that even that environment was still a rough scenario for you when from your mom's perspective and having to deal with the things that she's going through or
It was an absolute nightmare.
yeah.
I hated going home every single day.
Yeah, that's hard. That's hard. Was there other than Paul, was there anybody else that was a safe space for you at that point in time with that?
The entire staff at Wendy's,
Okay.
where I worked, also.
All right. All right.
Yeah,
So you were able to find another community within the workplace.
bunch of weirdos like me.
Right on. Okay. All right. But then as you're working at this graphic design, as a graphic designer at this company, was it just a print company or advertising company?
It was just a small business, right? It was three guys that were equal partners and they had a couple of accounts that kept things going. They
Yeah.
would occasionally do the logos and brochures and things for people, but it was like direct mail publications that they were cranking out.
Okay.
It was cool. It was
And
fun. And it was creative work to some extent,
right.
much as car ads can be creative.
Yes. We'll get into that a little bit more because I remember that vividly from when we started hanging out and met each other. So no college at all for you?
Yeah, I tried college for maybe half a year.
Okay.
And of course, right into you have to take your prerequisites and
Yeah.
whatever. But it was right back, like continuing with the photography and the graphic design until it got to the point where I'm like, I'm already getting paid to do this. Why is this guy like, I don't, there's no point in this for me. I can't, this doesn't make any sense. This is a waste of time.
Yeah. So you're literally taking control of your creative journey and you're already moving forward with it. So you're already picking up all the technical things that you need to know and realizing I'm already in it. So why do I need to be told by somebody else that this is how it needs to be?
To a degree, to a larger degree, I think it was youthful ignorance
Okay.
in the belief that you already know everything and that nobody can teach you something to do it better, very anti-authority kind of thing. I think more of that came into play because I certainly could have benefited from some guidance and direction. And but I was not at a point in my life where I was open to accepting that.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was out of youthful ignorance, stubbornness, I would say, more than anything else, because I didn't, again, there is no future in mind here.
Yeah.
I was convinced that I would die young, very young, and the only thing I need to worry about is how much I need to make, like today or this week, to get through this.
Yeah.
I don't need to worry about any of this stuff in the future because it's not going to matter.
Yeah. That's
I was an angry young man.
yes.
And
And it created a bleak outlook.
yeah,
Created a bleak
very
outlook.
hard to break through for anybody.
Yeah. Within that environment of working with these guys creatively and also too working at Wendy's in the restaurant, did you, was there a point where that conflict with authority came out in that environment that created a sense for you that, all right, I need to pivot. I need to change my environment again, change my atmosphere, and do my own thing,
At Wendy's,
or the graphic design position.
it was very easy because there are very clear expectations of you. This is what you need to do today.
Yeah.
And that's very easy to follow. But I also wasn't working for people who ruled with an iron fist like my mother did.
Okay.
So it was very easy to, I don't like, take orders isn't even the same thing, but receive direction.
Yeah.
But I knew what was expected of me, and I had no problem doing what was expected of me.
Then at what point did you decide, all right, I'm going to go out on my own?
I was very young, maybe just out of high school.
Okay.
So yes, just out of high school because it was 95 when Paul and I started Eclipse. At first it was Eclipse Layout Services,
Uh-huh.
and we had a little bit of a funeral home vibe going there. So we had to change it to Eclipse Productions.
Yeah. I remember. I remember. And so how did you guys get your first clients when you're starting this? Because I'm assuming you've got to start thinking about some kind of direction to an extent, right? Even though in your mind it's what do I got to do just to get through the day scenario.
I remember our first client. It was ProTech Electronics. And I think we got that account because that's where we had our pagers from.
Okay.
And I convinced Greg and Terry that I could make them a cooler logo than they had right now.
Nice.
And then, of course, if you got a new logo, you need new brochures and new business cards and everything else. And from there, I think it was just like joining those like small business networking groups. And
Okay. Yeah. That's an interesting shift from an outsider's perspective in terms of you expressing very clearly that you didn't have a hope for the future. You didn't see the point of having a hope for the future. But yet now you're in a position where you and Paul are creating this business atmosphere and getting these clients. And so there's
there
a
was nothing business about that atmosphere, nothing at all. We were kids. It was his parents' basement that we started in. It was fun, and there really wasn't even any thought for the future. We're going to build this thing and we're going to be huge. And it really was more about it. And Rich, this is the story of why I did almost everything I did in my younger days. Anything that I could do to avoid or dodge long-term responsibility in any way, shape, or form was the motivation. If I could make money as a self-employed graphic designer, I would never have to get a job. It was always about dodging responsibility and avoiding growing up,
yeah, yeah.
becoming an adult.
So you said that was 95 that that
Hmm.
took place. All right. And at what point at what point did you guys shift into having your own space? Because I remember when I met you guys, you were in the condo. So how long after being in the basement starting did you end up in the condo and doing your own thing?
2 or 3 years, and really all that was is needing a place to live. After I left home, I'm trying to, I don't remember. I remember moving in with my cousin, and like she was going to Oakland University at the time, and her and a couple of her friends had an apartment like across the street.
Yeah.
And it was a huge place. So they had 4 bedrooms in there and they were looking to rent one out. So I think that was my first landing spot. I moved in with them.
Yeah.
And then, but I had always wanted my own space. So I was looking for apartments. And my aunt, who was a real estate agent, was like, look, an apartment is just a waste of money. For what you pay for an apartment, or maybe even a little bit less, you can get a condo. And found the double four.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting.
I think I was maybe 20 or 21 when I got that place.
Yeah, for sure. What I'm finding interesting too with this is there's somebody else coming into the picture who's watching you, who's seeing what you're going through, dealing with different things. And this person is giving you advice of, look, even though your mindset currently is, I just got to get through the day, make the money to get through the day. She's bringing in a perspective of a long-term potential with having a condo, right? She's like, all right, you're putting your money into this, which is going to last longer than just you putting money into something that's just going to be a monthly scenario, right? This condo will be
Yeah.
like an investment type scenario for you, which outside of your perspective, that's a long-term investment, right?
Yeah.
So the this person is seeing what you're going through, understanding it, just giving you a little bit of a nudge, not necessarily a hardcore, you no, that's stupid. Don't be doing that with the apartment thing. But here, look at this option and take a look at this and think about doing this versus this other thing here because she wanted you to have something substantial or something that was foundational for yourself.
Yeah. Have always been very lucky to have people like that in and out of my life in those times. And again, during that time and in that moment, none of that is occurring to me that this is a long-term investment. It is, oh, sweet, that apartment would have cost me 900 bucks a month, but this place is only going to cost me 800.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
just month to month thing. Like I can afford this. Different times for sure, people could get something.
Yeah, exactly.
I had the two, I had essentially the two jobs. I was doing my own like side thing with the graphic design, and I was still working at Wendy's.
And I'm assuming you and Paul are still playing music together, working on that type of stuff as well.
Yeah, farting around. Yeah, but I think there were other things going on at the time too. I remember, and maybe that was around the time that things started with torsion. I don't know, man. Terry from Protech, he was a bass player,
Okay.
and, and we were always talking about music. And then my buddy Joel, he was.
Yeah.
I don't remember how that whole band came together, but I do remember practicing at Terry's house and having fun with a lot of that. So I don't think I was making a lot of music with Paul at the time. We were more in high school, messing around after school kind of thing. And then around late teens, early 20s, I was interested in making more music. So that's when I was in the metal band.
Also, too, and I don't remember if this was the case. I think it may have been the case, but I don't remember specific. Did Paul live with you too at that point in
For a
time?
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Had a lot of roommates at that condo. Yeah. Paul
Yeah.
lived there for a time.
What point did you stop doing Wendy's? Did you leave that position? How long into doing your own business did that take place?
I think I was at Wendy's until I was maybe 21 or 22.
So in times of in time frame of being in business for yourself, was it like a year, 2 years into business that you
Yeah,
just
probably a couple years. Yeah.
okay, okay, right on. Because I remember too when I met you, it was because I was working with George and Nick Calvet at Speedy Printing. And I was taking my client work to them to get produced with print and everything. And at that point in time, I was drawing everything out. And they said, hey, we need you to have this in a different format when you bring it to us because we can't keep. And I think maybe you were already doing work with them, layout work for them.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
And so they said, hey, why don't you connect with this guy because he does stuff for us, and you'll probably connect with him because they knew at that point in time too that I was starting to hang out with some different bands in the area, and I was had been introduced to Kid Rock around that time also. And so they're like, "Hey, this guy, he's playing some music. He's doing all our layout stuff. Why don't you go over and check him out?" So I think I brought that project over to you guys, and that's how I met you and Paul. And that was in this 96-ish, 97-ish range.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
But I do remember that it definitely did not feel like a business, which you just mentioned.
Yeah.
It was a little bit, it was a little bit like a clerk's scenario, except different setting
Yeah.
of work.
Yeah, for sure. It was a means to an end and a way to avoid becoming a grown up.
Yeah. And it at this point too, are you starting to move a little bit farther along into drinking and smoking and different things like that
That's what it was all about.
to numb down the what you were feeling internally?
Well, yeah. Yeah. It was like, we have to do this to make money, to have this. Good time is all you got. It's the
Right.
only thing that matters in life.
Yeah. And at that point in time too, I had mentioned to you that I was working with Kid Rock, and that kind of set off some light bulbs for you because you were trying to get torsion going and moving as a band. And as well, I was working in the nightclub scene part-time
Yeah.
at that point. So you were, I was, I was looking at it from the scenario of, hey, I've been working with these nightclubs. They're letting me do these events. I can potentially get you guys gigs in this arena. And so we started doing a little bit of that type of stuff as well from a creative standpoint, where I started seeing about helping you guys get into a couple of different places, as well as you guys are helping me get all my graphics and illustration stuffs together and structured so I can go back over to the print shop and get it taken care of. But, and also too, one of the things that I remember is that at that time, that's when you had to flyer to get your band to get attention to your band.
Right.
So you were designing up all the flyers and then printing them off on multicolored paper. And then you would have to go out and basically do guerrilla marketing. You
Yeah.
literally just plastered them anywhere and everywhere that you could get them into. And some of the benefit of what you had with working with your clients was that some of them were party stores. So you could put stuff on the counter at the party stores, different things like that. But I'm gonna peel back to you being in high school dealing with the ad type work, and then fast forward to when I'm meeting you. One of your biggest clients was it a car dealership or was it a
It was a direct mail piece that was all car dealer ads for car dealers. Yeah.
yeah, okay. And I remember very vividly that client was a huge stressor for you, to say the least.
Yes.
And what was that like with your mindset in terms of, all right, I'm running this business, I've got this going. I'm just trying to get through the day to begin with. But was it a weekly thing or was it a monthly thing
It
that
was
went
a weekly thing.
weekly? Okay. So even in that moment, you're looking at this from the perspective of the client, that this is a weekly thing, it's a continuous thing. So even though you're in a day to day, I'm just trying to get through this day, you have to pivot a little bit with that thought process of this is coming up. It's got to be finished by this date, and then next week is going to start all over again.
Yeah, and it was all about getting it done because it was a high paying account
Yeah,
and it was a repetitive and it was money that I could count on, but that is what paid the bills and that is what afforded the weekend opportunities.
yeah.
It was always just about living for the weekend.
And also, too, those weekend opportunities turned into excessive amounts of soothing ingestion.
That's what I meant.
Right. Soothing
Any
ingestion
anything that you could do to turn off the real world
and the
for
feeling.
as long as possible, that was what I cared about.
And also, as well, there's starting to become a point where that element is starting to affect some of what you're doing in business as well, because Paul is starting to get uncomfortable with what the environment is looking like. Am I correct?
Probably to a degree. Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
Because I remember there was a point where you guys had to separate in terms of being business partners.
Yeah, and I don't really remember the circumstances around that, to be honest with you, other than probably not having the money to pay him.
Okay. I can believe that very much so because I was I was a viewer of that point in
Yeah.
time from that perspective because I'm working with you a little bit with the band. I'm seeing Paul starting to decide, okay, I've got to move out of this situation, and whether it was the money scenario or whether it was what I was seeing from a perspective of, whoa, Dennis is running fast and hard here with everything that he's doing.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this, and then I do need to take a quick break.
All right.
So back then, in addition to the what do I have to do to get through today kind of thing, it also was about just being as reckless and self-destructive as possible
Yeah,
because I wanted to die, but I did not have the guts to attempt suicide.
got you. Okay. Okay. Yeah, the fear, or not even the fear, but the mindset that you are not in, you're, you don't have the courage to end your life as your father did, but yet you're doing whatever to try and allow that to happen in a not even a natural way because you're using substance to be able to do those types of things, to forget, to be reckless, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about this as well, Dennis, and I don't even know if you ever realized it or remember any of it, but I had the same mindset at that point in time. I wasn't going as hard at it like you were, but I had the same mindset of I just wanted to die and I didn't care how it happened. I just didn't want it to be slow. From my perspective, it was a scenario of, okay, I'm seeing these things take place with you. I'm seeing how hard you're going. We're booking some gigs with the band, getting you out there. And I think at one point I ended up setting up a desk within your condo to where I could be there with you on a daily basis to help
Yeah.
move things along. And I helped you with one or two projects, I think, from an illustrative standpoint. And I still have the one specific job that we did together, which was that landscape company, and you had me draw the waterfalls for it.
Yeah.
I still have that in my one of my portfolio books. But e even at that point, I'm starting to see where you're starting to go harder with the drink, the smoke. And at that point too, I think you're doing a little bit of drugs, some pills, some whether it was acid or whatever was popular at that point in time. I know it wasn't.
Whatever came my way, really, is what.
And also too, I think that the band was starting to feel some of that. And there was a bit of a rift, so to speak, that was building there. Am I correct with that? Am I remembering that right?
Could have been. I would have been completely unaware.
Because I know for sure that Joel wasn't really into the drinking and all of that kind of stuff. He would have a
No,
drink, he would have a smoke here and there, but he wasn't really into partying.
no, he was not.
But he was still to this day, bro, he's the most amazing guitar player that I've ever come across. And
Yeah, he's awesome.
I'll always remember that about Joel. And I think too, when the band is starting to experience this and they're starting to be like, all right, we can't continue on like this. I'm seeing it as, all right, this is starting to break down and you're starting to move farther into a place of going harder. And I started to separate as well because I was like, okay, this is going to create a situation potentially where Dennis may get arrested for some of the things that are taking place. Because I remember we were at Winners one night, and there's probably about 6 or 7 of us there, and you just kept ordering pitcher after pitcher along with shots, and the more that those kept coming, the louder you were becoming, and people were starting to notice this. And in my mind, I'm like, wait a second. This is going in a direction where the cops are going to be here. And I do not want to be locked up because again, this is me having that same mindset. But yet also, too, it's not long after I've come out of the hospital and have been locked on the psych ward. Cannot get out of that. I was locked in there until my doctor said, okay, we think we can get you back into society, back to home, that kind of a thing. So in my head, it was like, there is no freaking way I'm taking a chance of getting arrested and being locked up in a cell and losing freedom like I had experienced it in the psych ward. And that's where there's this big gap of where we didn't see each other for quite a long time. But I believe within this period as well, you get to a place where you start to work on yourself, start to look at working on yourself. Do you remember when that took place and what the circumstances were around that?
Yeah, I mean, it was funny enough when we were doing all the working with the band and you were helping to try to get us some gigs. And then we started that thing where we were going to try to help other bands get gigs,
Yeah,
where we came across a certain CD from another band.
yeah,
And the next 5, 8, I don't know how many years, I would spend largely with them and meeting a whole nother group of people. And my world expanded for sure. I was still going pretty hard with the partying. However, this is another point where people have come into my life watching over me kind of thing. And through that relationship and experience, I really started taking songwriting more seriously. And that is around the time when I wrote the song for my dad, which was another turning point, acknowledging the grief that I had been denying for so long. And that whole first album was basically just grief coming out.
Yeah.
And it was a very cathartic, transitionary time. I was reaching or approaching the age where I figured things would start to flame out, and I was okay with that. But also starting to feel like, oh, maybe it's not too bad to be alive if this is some of the stuff that I can do with it. And meeting some people along the way that really had a very powerful and profound and healthy impact on my ability to see past the next 24 hours.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you that it was a 180 because it was not,
Yeah.
but it was a very slow creep towards
The possibility.
possibilities and awareness and acceptance. And yeah, possibility is a good word.
Yeah. Yeah. And with doing that and moving in that direction, you're starting to shift into a different level of genre of music, so to speak, as well. It's becoming a little bit softer, not as hard as Torsion was.
Definitely not heavy metal, but and this is the thing as far as music goes, I've never really been interested in a genre. Like when it was me and Anna writing those songs and recording those songs, it was very mellow singer-songwriter kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then getting some of my other friends and active musicians, they were friends and active musicians at the time. It became more of a rock thing,
Yeah.
not anywhere near as heavy as Torsion was, but just a very broad experience with all of it. And it was really awesome. It was really great. And I think there was a lot of healing that was starting to happen at that time, and certainly growth, although it was slow and certainly not linear.
And at this point, are you starting to think of this song that I've written and these other songs that have helped me express some release of grief? At what point do you start thinking that I want to start sharing this to kids, schools, different things like that?
Oh, that was all unintentional. During that time, that's when I first started approaching therapy.
Okay.
And it was a slow start and it was a rocky start. And it was also around that time that my mom had actually given a copy of our first CD to the lady who was running the Survivors of Suicide Loss support group.
Okay.
So she asked me to come in and perform that song for group, which I reluctantly agreed to. But that was another huge turning point because it was in a room full of people who had lost someone the same way I lost my dad. And there had been so much time not talking about it, not being able to talk about it.
Yeah.
And now there was this group of people who understood and were going through the same thing. So those were two things that happened in that period: individual therapy and group therapy through this support group.
Yeah.
So it was the support group that actually gave me the inspiration to start the organization.
Okay.
And the intention in the beginning was never to start an organization. it was to have an event once a year where bands come together to raise awareness and some money about suicide.
Yeah.
And that was the first thing we did. That was our first event, and there was like 5 bands, and we put out that compilation CD. And so the whole thing was just about raising awareness and bringing musicians together to do that.
Yeah.
But after that first event, that's when I had gotten a phone call from a local school asking if I could come in and play the song and talk to the students about suicide awareness. And it just snowballed from there. Within a couple of years, it became a full-time thing. I was getting so many requests. There was such a need and a desire for this. And the approach that I was taking was very unique, using music to open this conversation. And so it was, I think, maybe 2 years after our first event that we got our 501(c)(3) paperwork done and started the whole formal process. And that's when I became an executive director. This was my full-time job now, doing the presentations, doing the fundraising, and just running the day to day.
Yeah. And you've been doing that for how many years now? Is it
17 years.
17? Okay. Yeah, that's a long journey. And too, along that way, you've gotten married and you've got a couple kids now as well. So that is another aspect of your life where you've taken the chance and the opportunity to look at the possibilities. That's a beautiful thing, man. A beautiful
Thank you.
thing. With what you're doing, talk to me about how the elements of creativity are coming into play with the organization and putting that out to the public.
It's central and it's going to keep moving in that direction. I think 17 years ago, people's willingness to talk about this stuff was not anywhere near what it is today.
Correct.
So a lot of progress has been made in the arena of raising awareness and reducing stigma.
Yeah.
I think we have plenty of awareness around everything. And I think what we need now more than anything is action. And so through Detour Project, which has had many incarnations over
Yeah.
the years,
Yeah.
my what I know my role is in this, or where I should say I feel the most comfortable and confident, is to do exactly what my 10th grade creative writing teacher did for me.
Yeah.
And that is to instill hope for people who are struggling through the power of creativity. And I know that everything else is also necessary and important too, the clinical side of things, the psychological side of things, the medication side of things. But there are people doing that.
Yeah.
I am not a clinician. I am not a psychologist. I am an artist. And I can't tell you who to attribute this to, but one of my favorite quotes about this whole thing and the inspiration for me is the most important thing that the artist creates is the artist.
Yeah.
If you can connect people to their already existing internal desire and need to create and encourage that
Yeah.
and foster, that's a coping skill that is 100% in your control, that is 100% available to everybody, and that is 100% essential to this whole process of survival.
Yeah. Absolutely. That was profound. Very profound because it's so true. And from my perspective, even, I believe that creatives have the ability to step into a space where they create a light that is so bright that it helps to heal others as well. And the more and more we can get people to tap into that internal creative within them, the more and more that light is going to expand out to others.
Said, and I totally agree.
And that's part of what I've tried to do with this new approach to what I'm doing with the artist recovery is to be able to be that kind of that lamp holder, be that person and that guide as well as what you've done with your work. And it's taken me a long time to get to this place, but you have been an inspiration in terms of doing that. And I've always wanted to be a part of what you're doing. That's why you and I have done a couple of interviews in reverse a few times, but for whatever reason, they've just been that. And it may have just been moments in time that you and I needed to have a conversation to where that would come out of me, and that was all that was needed, right?
Yeah,
And you would pull those things out. Now we're in a reverse situation where I'm drawing lines for you to see different things.
that's
Uh,
awesome.
but it's something moving forward that it's needed because we still see that there's been definitely long strides of where things have come from and from where they were, but I still believe that there's still not enough talk about the mental health in society, and especially if you niche down into the artist community. I don't think there's enough talk to remove some of that stigma. And that's why I'm trying to have these conversations, is to be able to bring that out and to do that as well. With what you've got going on and what you're thinking about in the next 6 months to this year, what are some of the things that you're looking at that are you're going to try to implement?
You're asking a guy who's never thought about the future to
Right.
talk about the future.
Yeah, I'm doing it.
So for 3 years now, I have been trying to get this detour project formalized into a program that schools can adopt and implement.
Okay.
A lot of roadblocks along the way and still continue to be. I think we're making progress and getting closer. But right now, it's still very much in a trial and error phase,
Okay.
not with not with regards to the structure or the activities, but with regards to logistics.
Okay.
And that's a huge challenge for the schools. And there isn't a one size fits all way to do it from district to district or even school to school.
Yeah.
I would say if I think about too much, I overwhelm myself. But if I have a singular goal, it's to figure out how to get this to work for people so that people can start benefiting from it. So my long and short answer to that is a big, I don't know, still figuring it out.
Got you. Okay.
I'm pretty sure we're getting closer. It's just time and variables, and it takes back and forths to work through that. So I'm
Yeah.
in the back and forths right now, but I'm keeping the faith and moving forward.
Good. Good. The creative part of Dennis in doing all of these other things that are executive minded in running the organization. When does that creative get to come out at this point in life for you?
Unfortunately, at this stage, not very often, between the demands of running the organization and the demands of being a parent of small children.
Yeah.
I don't have the Sunday afternoons to sit around playing my guitar like I used to. But I can tell you that off and on, when I've had the chance, the rare opportunity to be alone, I do still play. I do still write. I'm sitting on dozens of songs that are either works in progress or fairly complete that I know someday I'll be able to sit down and record. But on the flip side of that, also doing these workshops for teens and for grown-ups, I get a chance to be creative there because it's not about it's not about me running an educational thing on slides. It's about me also sitting down with you and making these things.
Yeah.
So I get the opportunity to do that there too.
Expound a little bit on those workshops, what those look like and what they're entailing.
Yeah, and I did one yesterday, and there's a number of different ways to do it. So yesterday was a virtual thing for a credit union, and it was like a lunch and learn. And I led them through some simple free writing exercises with prompts and blackout poetry.
Okay.
And then you have a conversation around what you wrote, what you created, and as making connections with people is easy and seamless when you're sharing what you've created. And I can do that with adults, I can do that with students, I can do that with just about anybody. And it's really great. It's really, it's profound every single time,
Yeah.
both for everybody involved and with what I personally walk away with and have to think about because you're accessing and releasing like subconscious thoughts and emotions, and something comes out every time for you to
Yeah.
reflect every single time. It's a bite-sized growth and healing process.
And with that, are you seeing within yourself how far you've come? And also, too, are you able to see yourself at a place where you're starting to get comfortable with you internally?
Sometimes
Sometimes it's still a process.
it's still a process, and there are parts of my psyche and personality that I don't think will ever change, no matter how much work goes into it. So I think a large part of that, especially in middle age, is like radical acceptance. This is who I am. I don't have to feel ashamed of that anymore. I don't need to apologize for it. I don't need to make excuses for it.
Yeah.
But this is probably the most content that I have ever felt in my life, even if there are moments where I don't feel that and my anxiety is through the roof or my depression is just like soul crushing.
Yeah.
That shit still happens, but that is part of who I am. What can I do during those times? Not to avoid it, not to make it go away, but to explore why it might be happening and what can come from that. So there's a perspective shift as well.
With that depression, for me, I've had to be on medications. Is that something that you've experienced or had to implement as well, or has it been a scenario where you've done other things to level that out?
Yeah, it took a long time to get there, but I've been on Zoloft for years.
Okay.
I'm not entirely convinced that I'll be on it for the rest of my life. I don't want to be on it for the rest of my life.
Yeah,
I don't
same
know
here.
what it's doing.
Right. At this point, exactly. We don't know what's happening here because
All right.
it's not gone.
But
It wiped us
I
away.
will say this. When I finally said, okay, I'm going to give this a try, obviously the first month or whatever it is, absolute shit.
Yeah,
But after that, it did help alleviate some of the really intense symptoms of the anxiety.
yeah,
And that allowed me to do the work in therapy because you can't really accomplish anything if you're activated all the time.
for sure.
It doesn't matter how much reframing you try to do when you're in an agitated state. So it did help with symptoms. I don't know where I'm at yet because I haven't tried weaning off. It's
Okay.
something I'm hopeful about doing in the near future.
Yeah,
And if things go sideways, then I also know, oh, okay, this helps. I better pick it back up.
yeah, yeah, exactly. One of the things that I've been looking at, because I've been on mine for so long, my body is just, it's accustomed to it to the point where i- I can't go without it at this point. So there's been a lot of research that's being done, especially within the veteran community, with a plant medicine called ibogaine. And I don't know if you've heard of it or not, but
No.
what it does is it will immediately stop any of the addictive components that an individual is experiencing. Like literally a snap of the finger type stoppage. And it's phenomenal that the research is taking place, that the possibility is there. Many a veteran who have dealt with alcohol, drugs, all of those types of things where it's just a constant thing that they can't stop doing, but yet they're going and having these ibogaine treatments, which they're having to go to Mexico to do these, and it's overseen by medical facilitators as well as facilitators who are respecting the plant in terms of a ceremonial aspect as well. So they're incorporating a little bit of both sides of it. They're making
Mhm.
sure that they've got the medical side of things covered if there's something that's going on, taking place. There's some preemptive stuff that they have to do before you even take the plant. And then there's monitoring thereafter for a day or two and then periodically at certain times. But it's literally stopping the addictive element within that person. So my
Oh,
hope,
that's wild.
yeah, my hope at some point is that I can be able to potentially work with this plant and stop this medication and get off of it because just for lack of taking it for so long, my body's just addicted to it at this point. And I'm not on high dosages of anything whatsoever. It's very low dosage, but again, I'm just taking it for so long.
Yeah.
So that's something that I've
Fingers
been
crossed.
looking at that's hopeful. And I hope that eventually it gets downgraded because it's up there with mushrooms and psilocybin and everything else. So it's a Schedule 1 classification, and there's legislation going on where they're trying to at least drop it to a 3 so that the studies that are being done, which a lot of them are being done at Stanford University, University of Kentucky was looking to do that, and then something happened with legislation that it got bumped out of their ability to do so. Now Texas is picking up the mantle to do some more research with it. But if they can get it down to Schedule 3, it allows more opportunity to be able to do more research and to move the process along faster, hopefully. With having the young kids now, and that being not only a stressor, but also a joy at particular points in time, are you seeing any elements within them of where there's creativity that has some potential?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, dude. Every kid is creative.
Right.
Everybody's born with it.
Yeah.
It gets stifled
Right.
in too many people. Yeah. They're doing stuff all the time. Creativity and imagination. That's just a core part of who we all are. The importance and significance of that, I think, gets lost for a lot of people along the way in the name of becoming a citizen.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of that goes on that just snuffs that out in many ways. It doesn't get flourished or nurtured.
Got to get those scholarships and start that career so you can start paying your taxes and
Right.
contribute to capitalism.
And that creative side of things don't always play into the capitalistic model, as we
No,
know very well. As we know very well. With the closing out here, I know you've got a time scenario that we're looking at. What are some of the ending things that you would like to convey to the creative community in terms of moving forward, even if you may struggle with mental health issues at certain points in time? What would you say to them as fellow creatives?
oh man, I don't know. As a teenager heavily influenced by Seinfeld,
Yeah,
my goal has always been no lessons, no preaching, no, you know what I'm saying? Because I don't have all the answers, but I guess I can say this from my own lived experience and perspective, and that's don't let anybody convince you that your creative pursuits are not important. And at the same time, don't let like the goal cannot be compromised by accolades or money. The goal is the same as it's always been, and that's just to express yourself. You don't need anybody to tell you that that's good. You don't need anybody to pay you for it, and that should not be your pursuit anyway. That's a happy byproduct if and when it happens. I guess if there's anything that I would say to anybody, it's the same thing I was told in 10th grade by Miss Greeley. Keep writing.
yeah,
That's all.
yeah,
Or painting or drawing or making music or whatever it is that is your chosen medium or passion. Just keep doing it for the sake of doing it. None of the rest of it matters.
yeah, yeah. That was beautifully said, brother. And you may have thought that you flubbed it up, but yet the way it came out of you was very profound. And I appreciate you for that. And I just want to remind the audience as well as we close this out to listen to your heart and be kind to your mind.